Let's go lighting a little bit and we can do the intro now. Lighting, you go with component and you search load family, and you just need to go to the light fixtures. Here lighting, it's architectural, internal, external, and you have, as you know, a bunch of things that you can get from more of a standalone type of lamp to a fixated set of recessed ceiling lights or whatever it is. The nice thing about Revit is that the lighting elements or the light fixtures have already a controlled, basically a light emitter. So it's almost like you can trust a little bit that it's going to be actually working. Now, most of these lights are waiting or expecting a particular object. So some lights are expecting a wall. So some lights are expecting ceilings. Some other lights, you can place them on the bottom side of a floor, but you can't place them on the bottom side of a ceiling. Some of them, you can place them on the bottom side of the ceiling, but not on the bottom side of a floor, vice versa. So it's very important that you kind of understand first what kind of light it is and where it is easy to place. So if, for example, the ceiling lights make sense, they're actually expecting a ceiling, no? But depending on the model, it might actually be able to be implemented into a floor, depending on whoever did that lighting works. But notice how it says click on ceiling to place instance. So that's not going to work. So what I will do is create a ceiling. Ceiling, as you know, we talked about it back in the times. You can change the height here. There are ways of, I think we also talk about changing the angle of it, et cetera, et cetera. So there are ways to work a little with the ceiling, although they're a little bit dummy, if you tell me. You can create also model in place on your own ceiling with extrusion. There's horizontal or in a particular angle. Or you can also bring model from Rhino and assign a face, a ceiling component. So you can actually do those things as well. Now, if I actually place a component, the last one was a ceiling light. Notice how now I can place it perfectly, you know? So these elements could easily be seen from the level ceiling RCP. Depends again. I wonder if I have to turn it off. So most probably here, if you don't see something, I think I talked about this last time. If you don't see something, what do? We start checking on light bulb. It's not there, but most probably it's the ceiling. Maybe it's just that we're not seeing far enough, you know, upwards. So maybe it's an issue of not the underlay, but the view range. And take a look at this level. Let's see if that works. There you go. So I said unlimited to see beyond, and then I could see that. And now you can just select the slides. By the way, the ceiling that I place here is it's a compound ceiling, which means it's made of different components. And if you're going to place lightings in your studio in order to do a compound ceiling, you really want to make sure that they're actually in the center, properly placed, no? And then you can just start copying CO, multiple options, and say, you know, depending on the lighting, every other, every two, every four, and try to make it like a very nice, elegant repetition pattern, no? So if you go to the render now, be like that. When you render a particular light, you have an option here, is artificial lights. And it will open up and it will tell you, these are all of the lights that you have. You can dim them. So if you think they're too strong, and as you click, notice how they turn blue, which is nice to know. You can say 0.5, 0.1. It's from 0 to 1, and you can turn them off with a 0. You can group them, etc., etc. So they're actually great. Dimming does not change the light tone. If you select the light, you should not be changing these things too much, but basically the lamp settings are under the edit type. So there's a little bit of, you can change the materials of it, maybe some of the elements of the exterior shell of the lamp itself, something you want to change, but then you could potentially play with this, but I recommend that you just search for another type of lighting. Here's the light loss factors, like that's how far it reaches other surfaces, initial intensity, and so on. But this is what I recommend you just take a look and maybe in Google or try a different lamp that serves you better in that sense. Initial color, again, you're welcome to change, but I think it's entering a bit of a tricky world now. So when you render this, that's going to definitely change the entire environment depending on the lights you're placing. And one thing I didn't do is that if you have artificial lights, you might want to do interior sun and artificial, no? Because basically you're not only depending on the sun coming in, but also the artificial. You could also say interior only artificial and place as a background an image of a dark environment, like a dark city. And that should kind of work out nicely for you. Now the resolution is going to play an important factor. In some of your studio projects, maybe there's some areas with absolutely no natural light, and we can work a little with another strategy because it tends to look a little bit like burn sometimes. I do recommend, as always, adjust exposure and start tweaking this a little bit more till you find the perfect sense. But what if you still have some dark environments that you want to illuminate, and maybe in a fake way, but so you have a particular light under components, load family, light fixtures. Is that, oh, by the way, you have strips, which is basically a line. You can put it actually in a hidden component. You have, again, as I mentioned, some of those are wall lights or downlight wall washers. So there's all kinds of things that I recommend you use. And furniture. And I'm also asking, if I remember well, for you to look at designers, so download. And here's the tricky thing. When you look outside to the web world, you might find interesting models or basically files of lamps, but they might not actually work properly because of whatever settings that the developer has created. Anyway, towards the bottom, the studio light, it's basically a bubble, a point of light that emits light in every direction. This, you can place it anywhere in the space, could be floating around. I recommend you place it once, whatever it is. Yep. Maybe from the ceiling plan. And this one can be taken with no problem vertically down, whatever you want it to be. There it is. You can put it in an area that is dark. Maybe you can use the section, or you can just go to 3D, move it. But if you want to move it more precisely, you can move it in section and plan. And basically, it's going to emit light in every direction, and it could somehow help you out, illuminate some areas that are a bit darker in nature, like away from the windows and so on. So that's going to appear as another artificial light. That's the studio light. You can also control that a bit. And as the rest, you also have some settings for the type of light, and you can control a little bit how far it reaches. Um, and here, loss factor, you might want to do like a smaller. So again, 0 to 1 kind of thing. You can make it dimmer for some of these elements. Loss factor. Now this again a bit more sophisticated. You can try maybe to edit some of these elements and see what happens. But again, it becomes a little tricky to move forward. But maybe it can help you out. This is initial color. You can change that, so you can say less of a yellow tone. Most of the interior renderings in the parts of the space that they don't have any natural light, they tend to be like yellowish in Revit. So you can start changing the different tonalities here a bit. And then when you render this, it should include like a more lighting element. Maybe it's too much or too little, again, depending on how dark the space is. I think I'm gonna finish with a little render and see how it looks, and we can call it a day because we're in theory done.